So good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, maybe, depending on the time zone you are in. You're all very welcome to this talk on data science startups. And my name is Peter Jagan, and I am hosting the startup track of DataFest 2020. For those of you who don't know, DataFest is a conference organized by open data science community. And the community unites roughly 50,000 members worldwide. So it's a very nice platform for data scientists and engineers to collaborate around data science. Today I'm talking with Dmitry Isupov, who is a co-founder of Chattermill, a customer feedback analytic platform headquartered in London. And today we are exploring Dmitry's journey and Chattermill journey from the very beginning till the early stages of the business. So Dmitry, pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yeah, a pleasure to be on this episode.
Amazing. So I would suggest us to start from a brief introduction. It would be fantastic if you tell us a bit more about yourself and quickly explain what Chattermill does. And then we try to connect the dots from where you were to the moment where you and Mikhail became Chattermill.
Absolutely. About myself shortly. Yes, my name is Dmitry Isupov. I'm originally Russian. I'm originally from Moscow. I moved over to England in the 90s. So a long story. And I've been studying in the UK, and I started working in London after university. I went to Bristol University here in the UK. And I guess, my specialty in the university was mathematics. I was very into sort of statistical data analysis. And, subsequently the position I got, the job I got in London was in quite an interesting space. It was in market research. You can think of it as a consultancy which helps other companies understand their customer feedback, understand what the customers want. And I joined this sector in a role of, it was 2010, so it was before data science, to be honest, was like a widespread term. So, this position could be, called now data scientist, but back then, these were sort of referred as statistical analysis. And, very much from there, I sort of became aware of, that this is a very big industry. One thing that struck me immediately is the industry was actually quite sort of behind, from at least my perception from the outside when I was in university, what these big companies were doing in terms of they didn't really use any, for example, machine learning at all. There was very sort of simplistic and archaic, you could call it, statistical methods. I think like linear regression and quite simple approaches to data analysis. And long story short is within this sector, I worked with this sector for 5 years before starting Chattermill with my co-founder. I saw a lot of interesting work being done in terms of how companies were getting a lot of value from customer feedback, and it was high value work. There were sort of expensive projects, but one thing that I thought that can be done. This was we approaching sort of 2014. Is the rise of machine learning. Deep learning was becoming a much more you could say sort of available technique. GPUs are becoming consumer GPUs are becoming powerful enough to train neural nets at that point. So is that time where I saw opportunity for what one could say a side project or a pet project where aside from my daily job, I actually started working on essentially doing what we did as a company, but building my own technology based on obviously available frameworks to actually analyze this data automatically. So the consultancies or consultancy I worked for used mainly PowerPoint and Excel, and maybe some sort of old school statistical packages like SPSS from IBM. And at the same time, I saw sort of the rise of software as a service, the rise of deep learning, and I thought this is definitely an opportunity to build a really cool project out of it. You can build some amazing deep learning stuff, which will do. One of the biggest challenges we were facing in the in the space was analyzing unstructured data, and this is very much what I felt deep learning could solve. So very much, that's my background to myself. So I was working in the sphere. I saw that deep learning was coming along, software as a service was coming along. And I say at the same time, this industry was quite old, quite behind in many ways. And this became my pet project. That's sort of roughly the same time. My co-founder Mikhail, he was the software engineer with a background in investment banking, and he was in a similar, I would say, frame of mind, or in a similar, I guess, situation in his life where he was looking to grow and sort of, actually build, maybe start working sort of more than just his job, and start working outside projects. And this is how Chattermill started. It was me and Mikhail working on weekends, working on evenings to essentially build, you could literally think about it as a hobby or a pet project, build, some prototypes, some, NLP, some, maybe basic front end, some basic landing pages, basic maybe components of, this project. And I think, from our perspective, it was, like I say, something initially to, obviously we wanted to see how far this can go, but, kind of its minimal, say, floor level in terms of what we wanted from it is just to expand our knowledge of, these technical skills of deep learning, of, some coding skills. So very much that's how it started. I think, it's quite an important point. I know some entrepreneurs start with a vision, from day one that they're going to, build this thing, and they sort of have a very maybe clear vision how to do it. We also started with, a vision that this could be very big and very valuable to the world. But we started with, let's start with something and work on it as a side project and see how we feel, and see how essentially how it develops. And that's very much how Chattermill started. And I guess maybe, Peter, will be worth talking about the sort of what we did to, I guess, bridge this gap from pet project to, what one could say sort of, a more formal, real startup with funding, with clients, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly the point, I guess, that a lot of our community members are interested in. So there are multiple questions associated with this transition. One of them that we hear frequently is, how did you arrive to the idea? Like, have you played with multiple themes, multiple ideas, multiple pet projects, or you have concentrated on the only one that became Chattermill? How did it work out for you?
Mm-hmm. So actually, one thing that I was sort of from the very start of my career, so, when I graduated from university, I actually started building small, pet projects pretty much from the first year. I just found it natural. I like building things, I like to, especially, if it's to do with code, and, again, my passion is for data and statistical analysis. So, and, I was working in an industry which was full of data and full of the opportunity to find, valuable information, valuable insights and data. So, and, at the same time, it was kind of, I think, for me, what I found was maybe a perfect combination of, big potential and, sort of a big depth to an industry, in terms of the value it can bring. And at the same time, I was quite behind in terms of, it was maybe in the 90s. It definitely wasn't in 2010 in terms of, capabilities, tools, software, that sort of thing. So, and I think this gave, for me, this gave a lot of amazing opportunities to bring, what's is, you could refer to, specific sort of, using English, low-hanging fruits, essentially things which I could build myself. I was, even with 2-3 years experience in the industry, and, sort of not kind of expert by no means, but still be able to build, interesting, for example, visualizations, tools, I use, something like open source, like R, and some of the open source frameworks they have for visualizations, and actually build something very, impressive, within a couple of weeks, to visualize something that used to be done in PowerPoint, and it was interactive, and it was, obviously much different ways. So it was, a software-driven experience rather than PowerPoint-driven experience. So I had a number of these. I wouldn't say, Chattermill was kind of the first one, and that's it. So I had a number of these over the year. Usually they were mainly to help me sort of, do sort of, some extra value for the clients, or do some extra value, for maybe a project I was working on internally in the company. And I think that kind of, I think, is what I think showed me is I really enjoyed, building things, really enjoyed having these side projects. I did, make sure I found the time for them. So Chattermill, I would say, was probably like the third, if not the fourth, admittedly. It was, there was probably kind of a, obviously build up of experience and sort of understanding. of the industry, and what's important, what's big in the industry, what's maybe small in the industry. But I would say Chattermill was maybe the third or fourth, and it was specifically when I realized that understanding unstructured data, so text data, was actually a big problem, and it was a consistent problem. It wasn't just in one client or two clients; it was actually across clients. And then I also, I think, understood how fast the space was developing. Even in 2014, 2015, there was already a lot of great work being done with deep learning approaches to topic classification, sentiment classification, and there was a lot of libraries and frameworks coming out. So these, I think, things combined, I think this kind of I realized that this text analytics thing can actually be quite big. It's not like a 1 month project. This could be a multi-year project. So that's how I would say I would kind of settled or sort of picked, so to speak, the Chattermill domain. But it happened in iterations. It didn't happen overnight.
Okay. Interesting. I see. And you mentioned that you felt that it was a low-hanging fruit. So to me, as to an outsider, it doesn't look like a low-hanging fruit. To me, a low-hanging fruit is to get data from Facebook, structured, cleaned, lots of data, you can get it somehow, or from some other platforms. Instead, you went for something that is unstructured, probably harder to get. Was it a choice, or you had some long consideration, or you just felt that we need to go for unstructured data?
It's a great question, Peter. I think it was a combination of things. I think for one, probably one thing that attracted to me is it was quite challenging. So some of the other things I worked on were a lot more to do with structured data. So there were simpler and maybe more sort of more established disciplines, do some sort of maybe having some sort of better visualization for cluster analysis, for example. One of the things we did was cluster analysis on structured data, and you could sort of do a lot of cool stuff in terms of making that look better, making that more interactive. But what attracted me specific to text analytics, working with unstructured data, is it was actually hard. It's not something you can build and then you realize, well, there's no point of building it much better because it already works really well, and this kind of project is finished. With text analytics, I realized that there's actually so much depth to it, and it really depends on the data source you're working with. It really depends on whether you want to track sentiment, whether you want to track topics, whether you want to track topics and sentiments per topic. And I realized this is actually a lot more challenging. So that was kind of, I think that was a personal thing, so I was kind of like, I wanted something deep. I wanted something more sort of, I would say, complex as a sort of as the next project. So that was probably a personal thing that attracted me to it, is just a challenge. But I think also what the other side of it, I would say, is I saw, because we were doing this work already, except for we were doing it in a manual capacity. So reading comments manually, building PowerPoint presentations manually. However, the value to clients that we were delivering from analyzing unstructured data was actually very good. Sometimes it was, I attended presentations to clients where we present kind of, reports and findings and insights. And it was actually, I found that a lot of the time, their biggest sort of, the best things that we found for them in terms of, information they did not know was actually in unstructured data. So sometimes unstructured data, because it was quite complex to deal with, we would only maybe dedicate like 10% of time in terms of the presentation to it. But I think for many of our sort of, clients, that was actually the point where they really said, wow, this is really interesting. We want to dig deeper. So I realized that, clearly the industry was struggling to make the most out of unstructured data. I could see that. It was, again, with one client, I could see the same pattern over multiple clients. And I realized that, if I was to add value to how this data can be analyzed, there seems to be a lot of demand for it in the market. I can just see it in terms of what's essentially, you could think of them as buyers, because these people are already paying quite substantial money for these consulting projects, and there was definitely a market for it. So I was thinking, if I could use sort of maybe kind of like taking some of the maybe pet projects I had in the past, the concept that I would build something that makes it easier to interact with data, makes it easier to analyze the data, and bring this to text analytics. Obviously, it'll be a bigger project. That can actually be very useful for the industry. So I think there was two sides. For me, it was passionate. My own passion was in text analytics. I found it very interesting to work with, and I saw at the same time that there was value to it. So I think that was the first indication that this could be a sort of a commercial project, not just a smaller technical project.
I see. It's a very interesting line of thoughts. Thanks. And you mentioned iterations. You more or less now understand how did you arrive to this idea, and what was the moment when you felt that there was a time to convert a pet project into a business? So you quit your job, you started to do it full time, etc.
So again, that's an interesting, and I'm sure there's many different paths to this. Every startup has a unique path. For us, so what we with Mikhail, so we worked on this as a side project on weekends and evenings for about a year, maybe like 10 months. And what we got to a stage is where we built, we decided to test some of the commercial aspects in terms of if we can actually sell this. We were doing it sort of quite casually. So all we did is build a landing page, sort of very simple landing page, just explain, analyze your feedback data, platforms analyze, feedback data. And just we wanted to see how many click-throughs we get, to subscribe, to talk to us, to have that call. And at the same time, we were building, some sort of, very pre-alpha version, prototypes of the actual platform and the engine in behind the scenes. But what happened was actually, for us, it was kind of a push. We got approached by a London-based accelerator, Entrepreneur First. It's something which is quite big in London, possibly in Europe right now. But back then, it was they were quite new themselves. So we've never heard of them. But they gave us quite a sort of irresistible offer. They said, we're this deep tech accelerator focusing on sort of pre-product, pre-revenue founders to essentially help them essentially create a business from essentially what we were working on, something like a technical project, a pet project, and they basically invited us to join the cohort accelerator. And for this, we were already, because we were building the landing pages and we were looking to commercialize, we were already thinking that we should dedicate more time to this, because if this becomes serious, if we actually start getting clients, we will have to quit our jobs. Our jobs probably contractually won't allow us to have two things at once. And I think that was kind of for us a logical point where this is this seems to be sort of destiny, this opportunity, and we essentially decided that was kind of the the inflection point, and we quit our jobs at that moment and joined the accelerator. So I would say we were building up to that moment. We were kind of putting together. I think in a way you could say we were looking for the right opportunity. So I think the other alternative approach we had, we weren't really looking at accelerators. We considered maybe YC in Y Combinator in the United States, but we were sort of still kind of thinking about if that's the right way to go. What we were considering is maybe raising some initial small amount of money from investors we could find. I mean, London has got a very rich network of people, so we were seeing if we could raise some money and then maybe sort of work on it full time, just from this initial investment. But Accelerator essentially ended up being actually a faster, maybe easier option in a way to make that leap. And they were given some investment, very small, but some investment to actually sort of support us during that time. So that was kind of the moment where we set out, this is becoming a real project.
And there were just two of you, right? You and Mikhail.
It was just two of us, yeah.
So how did you guys meet?
Sure. So I guess you probably can tell it from the names. We're both Russian. When you're in a foreign country, Russian communities do tend to sort of come together. And we met. I met Mikhail through a mutual friend. Somebody I went to university with, and in sort of it's a circle of mutual friends. I think very much that what kind of got us to work together was we both shared an interest in building some technical, back referring to before, it was a sort of a startup, a pet project, and that's what kind of got us working together initially. So yeah, it was the meeting was. I know there's many stories of how founders meet. So we essentially met through just mutual circles through community.
Okay, so let's switch back to the Entrepreneur First. So you were invited to this accelerator, and prior to that, you were mostly building tech, right? And then started to touch commercialization, right? You had this landing page, you get some feedback. what happened after you started your acceleration program? Did you focus more on continuing building stuff, or you increased your commercialization efforts? How did it look like?
Yeah. So both myself and Mikhail are both sort of more engineers by backgrounds. So we love building stuff, and we don't have great experience. Well, we didn't have experience, and we didn't really like sort of, I guess, the concept of selling. So naturally, we, especially when we were before Accelerator, before Entrepreneur First, we mostly focus on building things, and we kind of, what we wanted to do is build this really cool, irresistible prototype, that's will sort of show the full value, and then kind of, build a landing page for it, and then see if essentially people find it and click through it, and essentially people come to us. Was kind of the, I think, our maybe naive initial sort of idea of how we would commercialize it. For this matter, Entrepreneur First was for us actually very important, because they told us pretty much from day one is, you've already built enough. What you built is actually okay. There's no point of building it more until we have, some commercial, essentially research, some commercial proof. You actually need to speak to some potential customers and figure out if, what you're building is actually in the right, trajectory, if it's on the right, if it's the right track. And they got us, they sort of got us to stop coding, stop building anything immediately, and start writing emails, and start reaching out to companies, start finding people on LinkedIn, through communities of professional networking, people who work in the sphere of analyzing customer feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially sort of that very changed the sort of dynamic of what we did day to day. Before, 90% of the work was kind of building, coding, maybe some landing pages, maybe some of the prototype, maybe, some product design. It went to completely flipped to probably 90% actually commercial, so outreach, so first lots of cold emails. I can talk about that very quickly, because I think that's a very important point for founders who are technical by nature, don't have sales, don't have commercial experience. It's actually sort of a bit of a sort of a shock that you have to sell, and it's actually not easy, I would say. In many ways, sometimes you think that building something in deep learning is very hard, but what you find is sometimes building is actually the easiest stuff. It's selling it, sort of getting first of all some sort of message around it, what it does, and then finding the right people, contacting these right people, and getting their attention, getting them to meet you, meet me, Mikhail, is actually, especially in the very stages when you don't have anything, is quite hard. And I think it's a very important moment, because I say that because I think if we weren't in the accelerator and we tried ourselves, we would have probably thought something wasn't working, and then we need to build more, and we probably kind of went back to building more. Whereas what the accelerator gave us is they gave us this reality check that they said, the next couple of months will be very, very hard. You guys will be doing something you don't naturally do, and you need to persevere. You need to actually just keep pushing, and try to get meetings, try to essentially get interest, try to get somebody to subscribe to essentially a beta test, a prototype, MVP, whatever you want to call it. And I think that motivation and sort of their confidence that was the right thing to do, and we did kind of assume that they're sort of experts, and we should follow their advice, was actually a very valuable thing. Because for us, maybe a couple of weeks of sending out emails, cold emails to people we never spoken to, and saying, hey, do you want to test, try our text analytics solution? It went, first 2 weeks of pretty much no replies. It was very tough. It was very demotivating when you're sending out hundreds of emails a day. We're using mail merge. We got all these tools to do mail merge from Google Mail, and you get no response, and you sort of you're just thinking like this is a brick wall which you're just going into. But it really actually changed at one point, maybe on sort of the first couple of days of the third week. We actually got a response from a company based in London. It was a sort of a financial management company, robo advisor, fund management company, who are a really cool name, and well respected in maybe the startup industry. And they said, hey, we actually have a lot of customer feedback which we need to do something with, and nobody has the time to do anything with. So yeah, why not? Let's talk. And that was actually a very critical moment, because as soon as that happened, So we got a meeting with them, quite quickly. And at that point, we realized that actually these guys, had a use case which was actually genuinely fitted what we were building. Not perfectly. We needed to change a little bit in terms of what we were building, but it actually was on the right tracks. And they were, essentially they were willing to pay money for it. So it was quite an awkward journey, I would say, for us, because we've never sold before, so we weren't sure what we were selling. We didn't have, a full platform built by no means. We didn't actually show ourselves if we could deliver. So there was, I would say, the first conversations you have with potential clients will be quite awkward, and will feel a little bit that you are sort of selling something that doesn't exist at the moment. But it was a critical moment, because as soon as we started we went from building something for somebody to building something that already at least one client wants. And this was critical, because it got us a lot more focused, and then we started moving quite quickly to essentially having agreement with them, a commercial agreement with some money behind it. And I think for any startup, probably the sort of a very important point is when you get your first revenue. So we got the first revenue from this company, this I think really took a project from kind of a pet project, which we were building something, even though we quit our jobs, we were still just building something, to we were servicing a client. We were actually delivering something to a client, and that became a lot more serious. And from now on, very quickly, I think, because we worked out how we sort of reached this first clients, how we found them, how we emailed them, we quickly sort of updated our process of cold emails, and then sort of within the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we had another 3, 4, 5 meetings across London, which was amazing. And then we realized so many people were responding, and indeed multiple companies were saying the same thing. Yes, we have a lot of customer feedback. Yes, a lot of it is unstructured text, comments, they're not being analyzed. We would like to analyze them, and it seems that your solution can help. Let's meet. And then that was really kind of it became sort of that started rolling like a snowball. So and you gain more confidence. I think for a very critical thing for us is, the more you meet clients, the more you have difficult conversations, the more sometimes even you get pushback or sort of critique, or saying this is too early, this is not built. You get a reality check, and you're not sort of wondering whether somebody needs it or not. You realize that people need this. Yes, they might need to be a bit more complete. The main space was very, very sort of basic, but you realize that there is what we're doing is not insane. I think that's the main thing you realize. There is genuinely sort of people willing to pay money for this. We just need to keep building now, and what we're building is right. We just need to do it. And I think one point worth mentioning, it was probably specific for us, but in the time when we were servicing the first clients, we were able to supplement some of the software, which was very basic, maybe lacking, with PowerPoint presentations, which was a bit like my previous job, old school with PowerPoint presentations. But we were able to bridge that gap in the months when we were still building the software. We were able to deliver some of the reports in PDF and PowerPoints. It was a temporary fix, and we was trying to emulate how the dashboards would look like, but through PowerPoint. And we got a lot of useful product feedback in terms of which features, which charts, which visualizations people like and don't like. So that's, it's very specific, but I would say there's also kind of don't be afraid to sometimes bridge gaps in terms of software and products with maybe sort of more kind of things like Excel and PowerPoint. You actually get a lot of value from that. People still should be okay to pay money for it.
And I guess that's an interesting theme to spend some additional time. When you get this feedback from customers, there should be a fine balance between listening them and sticking to your own vision and your beliefs, etc. So can you share with us your approach, or maybe some heuristics? How did you select the feedback that you need to listen and implement in terms of features, tech stack, maybe anything? And some feedback that you filtered out, you was not agree with, and you stick to something that you believe is right?
Yeah, again, it's a great question, and you can write books on this in terms of how to actually listen to customers and what to take on board and what to actually follow your own vision. I think for us we did have quite a clear vision of where we want to get to. So remember, we were still very much tech products kind of more people, and we still most had experience in sort of building our own vision rather than kind of maybe kind of this more sort of product feedback loop where you listen to customers and you build upon that. So, for the first, I would say, for the first months and even for the first year, we had quite a clear roadmap of essentially the key features or the key capabilities we wanted to build. It was quite I think, I guess it was based on my experience in the industry, because we already worked in this industry for 5 years. I knew essentially what the clients needed to get value, like how they need to see the data, kind of like maybe how we do the text analytics, how we do the themes, how many themes do we need sentiment. So all of those issues, we didn't really, ask customers what they want. We came to, this is how it's going to work, or this is how we built it. And, this is how it provides value to you. And we found that, and I think it varies. There's probably a big nuance here. It depends on which industry you're building a startup in or building a project in. Some industries will have very set expectations on what a product should do. And some are something if you're building potentially something like a CRM or a project management system, because there's already an established market for this. There's probably a degree of expectations of at least a minimum kind of capability set that must be present. What we were building, I would say, was very new. Like very few people, especially in 2015, was a very small, text analytics was niche. It was like a very specialist thing outside of data science. So a typical person we would speak to would have not had sort of any idea about deep learning, text analytics, sentiment analysis. They would kind of understand what it does, but they wouldn't know how it works or what is the best way. So I think people were looking for us to actually tell them how to do it, rather than say, this should work this way, and can you build it faster, for example. So people actually looked for us to invent the whole kind of process for them. So I think that's why in this case it was important for us to have a strong direction, a strong vector in terms of here's the roadmap we feel we need to build as a must-have. We obviously took advice. I think the advice we took from clients was sometimes was how to maybe package it up. So things like, I think, pricing plans, like how you should price, like what should be kind of the parameters in pricing, like things about service, like how much support do people need, like clients need in terms of technical support using a product. Maybe how many people use it. So, should we build it for one or two specialists using it, or should we build it for more people using it internally? I think those more kind of I would say softer things in the product, and maybe the kind of a commercial package, so to speak, rather than the sort of, the fundamentals of the implementation. They were set from, before we joined the accelerator, we already we wanted to do sort of theme and sentiment per theme approach, which is the one we chose. And that we sort of said we're going to do it that way. But a lot of, I would say, the softer things, especially around commercial packages, pricing, price testing, that came from the clients. So it's a mix, and I think it depends on slightly. If the industry is very novel and very niche, you may have to actually have a harder, sort of not harder, but a more sort of firmer vision. If the industry is very sort of established, you probably want to listen to customers more to understand where the real pain points.
Yep. And customer feedback, and you mentioned even the word pushback. That's one of the challenges, and there are two other very typical challenges we hear a lot in the community. First being the access to the data, and the second one, the situation when you need to build a prototype or build a demo or whatever, but you don't have resources. So you have a commercial interest, potential commercial interest, but you just don't have resources to build it. Did you encounter either or maybe both of these challenges along your journey?
No, we absolutely did, Peter. And I can start with the first one. So the one about not having resources. So, I mean, as a team, me and my co-founder, we were sort of, I think, a strong team in the sense that we had a complementary skills. Mikhail could code and build some prototypes. I had some coding knowledge, and I also had the kind of the product sort of vision, what the product should do. So between us, we were able to build something, in terms of a working, dashboard with, things you can click and some, simple implementations of the, what the text analytics engine will do. However, this is very important, is that, as I already mentioned, we did supplement a lot of things with, PowerPoint presentations, essentially, supplementing some of the more advanced dashboards, which will take a long time to build, and we couldn't, we didn't have the time or resources to build. We supplemented with alternatives, which we explained, not all is going to be like this, we will build it. We explained to the first clients, but in the next couple of months, as we're building it, we will deliver them in PowerPoints. And, this is kind of, you're super early. That's why you're getting a cheap price. And, some of the things are not built yet. And, I would say for other I guess, yeah, that for us, I think that was kind of, we had a team to build something which could show that we could build software. And, if I give some representation of software and things that were missing, we emulated, say, PowerPoint and Excel sometimes. So that for us, again, that kind of, I know it's, for different industries with there'll be different expectations. I guess for our industry, again, the expectations were so low because something like this existed that, we could get away, so to speak, with having something very basic and then building on top of that over time. And to your question regarding data access, yes, there's no easy answer to that. So I think the way we solved it is, there was a few things we had, like we registered a company. So we had to register, you could find us at a company's house in the United Kingdom. So we essentially built out some documents sort of outlining our security procedures. I mean, they were very basic, but we've built out some documents outlining security procedures and what we do with the data, how we store it. Again, I took my experience because I worked in this industry which dealt with data. I knew what the kind of expectations were in terms of, data security, confidentiality, so we made sure we cover all those. And essentially we sort of, there is a trick of making yourself look bigger than you actually are. So, you don't say it's just, I know, again, we were sort of quite early in the day, so we were making good mistakes, but what we tried to do is say, it's not only just kind of myself and Mikhail, just two guys, with laptops, just, hacking away this thing. So you're giving your data to some guys up the street. We try to position as we're a company, we're backed by this amazing accelerator, which is, sort of very serious, is supporting some of the kind of, next generation unicorns. And, we are sort of, super qualified specialists. I've got 5 years of experience. So we made the most of our experiences, both Mikhail and myself. This was enough to convince clients to give us data. Of course, they had to anonymize it. They removed, we helped them sort of make sure they removed any confidential details. But, that was enough. This was before some stricter regulations came in about 2016, 2017 for UK GDPR, also for Europe. So I think it was easier back then. I think now it might take a little bit more steps to do. But I think it's, the trick was to come prepared and make yourself look more established, more, like enterprise than you actually are. So don't sort of say it's just me and Mikhail. Refer to, as plural as us. Sort of refer to our sort of leading data security guidelines and best practices. We're sort of experts in this field, and it's again, it depends on the clients you work with. But, for us, it was enough.
I guess it's a very useful advice not to neglect your experience.
Yeah,
that you are not starting from zero. Actually, you have done something important before. And just
I was just going to say, I can't emphasize enough how much, especially these early days, when people look at us, they don't see a company, they see, two individuals with, some potential. And if we have good credentials, experience, I think you should maximize that, because at the very least, they're saying, well, these guys might not build, it might not be sort of a huge company, but at the very least, they're professionals and they'll do a good job because, they've already worked in this industry. They work, some of the leading companies, for example. So it does give people confidence. I think often people are, at least here we found people were willing to collaborate. We just need to give them that something so they can say, yes, I've checked these guys and they're, legitimate. So it's just about and that's something that's, very likely your experience and your essentially your profile.
Awesome. Just being cautious of your time, probably last couple of questions. We didn't talk a lot about what Chattermill is right now. I know that you guys actually hired some people from open data science community. So
Absolutely.
I assume some people really know what you're doing. But for those of us who don't know, can you just briefly describe Chattermill, tell what you do, maybe mention any measurable things about the company that are not a secret, something like that, just give a picture. And then the last question after that.
Absolutely. Okay, so yes, I should give an introduction to Chattermill a little bit more. So we help companies understand customer feedback. So the challenge a lot of companies are facing, especially now post-COVID, is they're getting a lot of customer feedback. These can be things like surveys, which they practically send out, but this is also things like online reviews, chat data, email data, support tickets, also, all sorts of social media. So essentially companies are overwhelmed with customer feedback. And there's actually a lot of value in this customer feedback. If companies analyze it, they can understand how to improve their product, how to improve their service, and generally build a better customer experience. So, and if you look now, many companies are sort of mentioning in their financial reports and their investor reports their customer experience quality. Actually, they usually measure it in NPS. But for companies, that's actually become one of the leading, I would say, sort of KPIs they're measured on. Consumer-facing companies is their customer experience, which something like NPS.
And NPS stands for.
Sorry, it's a Net Promoter Score. It's a survey of how likely to recommend a company. I'm sure many of you have seen it. And it's from 0 to 10, and 10 is the maximum, 0 is the minimum. And it's essentially a good proxy of how happy or unhappy you are with, services of that company. And, the problem companies face is there's so much feedback and it's useful, but it's very hard to analyze. You can't read comments manually. You can read maybe 20, you can read maybe 50, but you can't read 50,000. And, essentially this is where we solve this problem. We provide the tools which automatically analyze customer feedback data and extract the important topics and sentiments to help companies understand, like, for example, are their customers unhappy with the product, with the delivery speed of the website, with the checkout process. So it helps companies understand what are customers unhappy with. And then that can be sort of turned into actions for the product team, for the operations team, for the marketing team, etc. So essentially, you can get a lot of useful actions which improve customer experience from this data. We essentially have a sort of software as a service platform. It has a front end with now what is now established front end with dashboards, ways you can visualize the data, so you can see like net sentiment or the sentiment, for example, trend or over time. You can say, hey, like our sentiment has decreased, and it's because we had a problem with delivery. So we need to make sure the sort of operations department is doing something about it. This is some actions that companies take on the back of the data. And now we work with some very amazing companies, ranging from companies like Uber, Spotify, Deliveroo here in Europe, to established brands like AXA in insurance, to banks and big supermarket chains. So essentially, we're working with a whole host of companies, and we actually work with some Russian companies as well. Namely, for example, Dostavista, and a couple of others are in process of negotiation. So essentially, that's what we do. We help companies understand their customers effectively. And the platform is, we have a deep learning engine, which is what we use for the text analytics side of things. So we have a quite a complex pipeline of where we train a custom model to track specific themes for a customer or for a client. And then we sort of train that model, we maintain that model. We also have sort of a massive data set of data gathered from other clients, which we aggregate into a big master model. So it's probably outside the scope of this particular discussion, but essentially we do a lot of work with various deep learning implementations.
And how big is the team right now?
The team is quite big. The team is approaching 60 people.
You are in London, in Berlin right now.
Yes,
right?
2 offices in London and in Berlin.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we're approaching 60 people. We raised about $10 million in funding altogether so far over a number of rounds. We're sort of in terms of, I guess, venture capital funded. So the latest rounds were done by venture capital firms.
It's an amazing journey, and I'm sure it will continue to be successful. The last question before we close, maybe if you can give a single advice to someone who is 5 years back to you, like you are doing your pet project, what would be that single piece of advice?
Yeah, it's I think for me, the biggest piece of advice was I think on even if it's a small project, even if you think it's something that you want to keep kind of, you haven't made up your mind if you want to have, for example, quit your job. I think the important thing, if you're enjoying the project and if you're sort of, enjoying working on it, that's an amazing sign. That's a great sign, because I think one of the things I found out, startups are very hard to do if you don't enjoy what you're working on. And actually an amazing experience to do like this, Chattermill has been like the best thing in my life. It's sort of, absolutely amazing journey of where we got to. And it's, it makes it amazing because if you enjoy what you're working on and sort of you're passionate about the technology, for example, you're passionate about the problem you're solving, it actually gives you the motivation and the energy to actually overcome all the difficulties which you'll encounter on the way. So I think for me, the main message to anybody who's working on a project, a technical project, then for example their spare time, is if you enjoy doing it, that's already an amazing start. That's actually already a big chunk of, I would say, the important foundation for for it to be actually a much bigger thing. And the important thing to do is make progress every day, or nearly every day, even if it's small steps, ways to make progress. So don't stop, don't let it go cold. I think it's to make progress, because what you find is the more progress you make, more opportunities open up. Like we were contacted by the accelerator, we weren't expecting it, we didn't plan for it, and it happens. And it's because we made progress by building a landing page and becoming visible. So I would say, as long as you're kind of building every day and making sure you're not just kind of doing everything by yourself, but you're essentially making sure you can be found, whether it's landing pages, or it's networking, whether it's putting something in forums. You'll encounter people, you'll encounter opportunities, and that will kind of what will be taking your project to the next stage. And will ultimately kind of find the right moment for you to essentially, for example, quit your job. So that's for me a couple of points in there, but make sure that you enjoy what you're doing. If you don't believe or enjoy or sort of find deep interest in the technology or the project you're working on, it probably will be hard to sustain it over years, through especially difficult challenges. And if you are, then that's already a very, very crucial part of the puzzle. And it's just about making progress, making sure you don't sort of abandon it, that it doesn't get cold, just keep building. And you'll find that opportunities will arise that you weren't expecting, and there'll be a big help.
Thanks. It's an amazing advice, and it was a pleasure talking to you today. I'm sure, and I hope we will see you in open data science community, and we will hear more wonderful news about Chattermill. So absolutely. Thank you very much.
Cool. All right, thanks, Peter. Yeah. All the best.